Hi everyone. Okay, so I've got a ton of questions about breastfeeding after one. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go in and just answer all the questions that you guys gave me, just like I do for stories every night. Um, but hopefully I'll be able to get more of them done here just by doing it this way. So I will wait to answer the questions until I get a couple more people. Um, all right, so let me find the first question. I'm also, if you guys haven't seen my blog post already, I am going to try and avoid questions that I answer in there because I really did try to answer all of the questions that you guys answer or you guys ask me the most. So they're in there. So especially if I don't answer a question that you had, make sure you read the blog post first. Um, okay, so I got a lot of ones like this. How to stop breastfeeding, especially at night. So I have a post on my blog that's called Transitioning to Milk, and that has a bunch of tips on how to actually wean. So just so you guys know, I see a bunch of questions coming in right now. It's really hard. They're coming in. It's hard for me to even see them over here. So if you have questions, put them into the question box unless it's clarifying what I'm talking about, if you would do that for me. I would appreciate it. Okay, so weaning, stopping the breastfeeding. You want to do it slowly because otherwise you can get pain, lumps, all of that. So go to the blog post. You can just search milk on my blog and you'll see that. And there's a bunch of tips in there for weaning, for transitioning to cups from bottles, all of that. It's all in that post. So there are a bunch of questions about that. So make sure you check out that. Okay, so there's that one. All right. Sorry, you guys are going to have to bear with me. Um, all right, so I got a couple. I think I was trying to scan through these a little bit earlier too because they're still coming in. I've got a couple about this. So this was definitely something that I experienced when I was a kid, or when I was a kid. Wow, when I was growing my kid, when I was pregnant. I was still nursing my daughter, and my nipples definitely got very sensitive. That is a thing. Kind of second trimester, they seemed to get a little bit worse and then they got better. So there is end in sight. Double check their latch. I know my daughter got really lazy with her latch while I was pregnant, probably because my stomach was in the way. And so that seemed to be an issue. I got blisters, that kind of thing. And we haven't had an issue with latch for ages. So it's a part of the hormones that go through your body. Just like the first time you were pregnant when you weren't already nursing, your nipples were sensitive, and now someone is sucking on them while they're sensitive. So that's what that is from. It's one of those things that a lot of people stop breastfeeding while they're pregnant because of. So that's definitely a valid reason to stop breastfeeding. It does get better if you work through it and just kind of grin and bear it. I know for me personally, once I got the latch worked out for my daughter, the pain was mainly at the very beginning. And then once she kept nursing, it got better. But it is one of the bigger issues with breastfeeding while you're pregnant. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It can be painful. Worth it for some people. It was worth it for me, but there were definitely times where I was like, this might need to stop. I've heard a lot of people say that they also didn't like touching. I didn't like touching outside of that, but I was okay with my daughter nursing on me. I know that's another thing that can happen a lot with pregnancy and nursing, so don't be alarmed if that is happening. So yeah, I would say that is that. I'll talk a little bit more about tandem feeding. I'm gonna take this one off. Tandem feeding in general. So to give you a ballpark of what we're doing, my tandem feeding is my daughter, my toddler, only feeds in the morning right now. She only nurses in the morning. And the reason that is because I did have problems getting pregnant my second time around while I was fully breastfeeding. And so we started the weaning process and then I got pregnant before I was fully done with the weaning process. And so at that point I just kept going. And so She only is nursing right now in the mornings. It's kind of our morning ritual. She comes up, she gets out of bed, and she crawls into bed with me, and we nurse. So at the same time, my baby is usually nursing too. So I've got two on at once. That's how the tandem is going. It's hilarious. It looks ridiculous. But I just kind of switch them and there it goes. It's not a big deal. I'm lucky that my older daughter is almost 3. So she understands, she gets it. So when you have a bigger distance in between your kids, it can be a little bit easier to do the tandem feeding. But I'm also, like I said, not tandem feeding all day, which would put in a whole different logistical nightmare. One day I had, coffee and I had 2 kids on me, which is interesting. But so that is our tandem. I had a question about colostrum. I'm not going to go in and find it, but it was about, do you still have colostrum after you give birth when you're already breastfeeding? And here's what I will say, because I could not find this like a legit source on this while I was pregnant, because that was a question that I had as well, and my lactation consultant couldn't answer it. There was no real feedback that anyone had for me. So as far as colostrum, what happened with me, I'm not a lactation consultant, so this is personal experience right here. What happened with me was my milk right after birth, it was like a fire hose, and it was definitely colostrum, but the volume of it was like colostrum mixed into milk. The volume of it was much more than you would ever see with colostrum, but it was clearly a different color than just regular milk. So it was both. For us, it was actually really helpful because my older daughter had jaundice, and part of that, you can help jaundice by having breast milk really come in a lot quicker. It's not really coming in, but become better supply quicker. And so the fact that I was still nursing my older daughter really helped my supply to be up right from the beginning. And so she was like choking her. I had so much right as soon as she came out. So that was a definite benefit to it. But it was mixed in. It was not your typical colostrum like you would see when you're not nursing. So I hope that helps from a colostrum standpoint. Like I said, I couldn't ever get the answer to that before I actually saw it. Okay, so again, lots of questions in here about weaning. If you're going to wean, check out that blog post on transitioning to milk. Doesn't matter what milk, weaning, anything like that, it's all in there. And then I've also got a blog about what are the best alternative milks, because I've gotten a bunch of questions in here about that too. So go to that. Let's see, on-demand nursing versus scheduled nursing. And hopefully you kind of got this from the blog post. There is no right answer to this, right? So everything is going to work for every kid differently, for every duo differently. So for some, it's all about on-demand feeding. And for some, it's all about scheduled. We did on-demand, but it just went into a schedule automatically. So that just kind of fell into the pattern. But the only time I would have an issue with on-demand feeding from a nutritional standpoint would be if your child is not eating enough. And that really is the dietitian side of me. And you're going to get different answers from different dietitians. But I'm all for on-demand feeding unless you're on-demand feeding 10 times a day and your kid is not eating at all, right? Because after 1, we do need food to be primary. And that's because it doesn't matter what kind of milk you have, breastfeeding, cow's milk, plant milk, it's not going to give you enough nutrition to satisfy all the needs that your children have. So you really do need to have food in there. And after 1, food needs to be primary. So if you're feeding on demand and your baby, your toddler at that point, is really not eating very much food, then you need to cut back. And that would be, so like the question right here that says the 20-month-old that refuses to eat absolutely anything and totally relies on breast milk. That's an issue. It is an issue. We do want to cut back on the breast milk then. I wouldn't cut back below 3 to 4 times a day at a minimum, because that is still giving a lot of benefit. But we need to balance this with food. So There's no perfect answer for this. Breastfeeding is a very, person specific thing, baby specific thing. So I can't tell you exactly what to do, but I will say that when you're looking at your balance of breastfeeding to diet, make sure that food, their diet is more than the breast milk. And so if you're feeding on demand and you're nursing more than they're eating, it's time to cut back, okay? Let's see. Let me pull up questions again if it'll let me. Okay, so what if toddler nurses to fall asleep? I've had this, the last live I did was actually with a sleep consultant, Samantha Day, and we talked about basically this. Night feeding, especially after 1, but before that, is a comfort thing, right? We want to try and get the calories in during the day. Some babies are too distracted during the day, and that's why they tend to feed at night. Some babies, it's just comfort. There's all sorts of reasons that they might do it, but there is no nutritional need to actually have them nurse at night. So I'm not going to tell you that, you can't get that out of there. How you get that out of there is whether it's some version of sleep training, right? Everyone has that negative connotation to that, but it's a learned skill. So teaching them, start distracting them. There's a couple of tips in the weaning blog post I was telling you about, but it really is all about teaching them a different way. There's no nutritional reason that they still need to have milk at night. Okay. Let's see. Lots of questions about water when you're nursing. All right. So from a nursing standpoint, especially between 1 and 2, right? What I would say is you nurse the amount you're going to nurse. So this one says 5 times a day, 3 to 5 times a day, 3 to 6 times a day. Really, that's what we're looking at ballpark for most people. I would recommend having, you're not going to be nursing while they're eating, so give water at the table. And you can offer water in between meals as well. There's no harm in offering water, but just like with everything else, you can't actually force your kid to eat or to drink, right? You can't force to eat, you can't force to drink. So all you can do is offer. Offering water and letting them drink whenever they want is really key. And so the thing is you really do want to be paying attention to if they're not having any more wet diapers, or if they're potty trained and they're really dark yellow urine, that's when we have an issue. So breast milk is going to give them some of their hydration, but yes, they do need to be offered water. And on top of that, we want them to learn to like water. So it's important that you're continuing to offer it to them and that you're modeling that you drink it. So breast milk and water between 1 and 2 are really the only drinks that I like to see. I don't like to see, if you're breastfeeding, I don't like to see juice if we can avoid it, anything else, right? Let's stick with water and breast milk. So there was a question right here. I see you. I see some of them pop up where I can see them. So what if your 1-year-old will constantly drink water from the straw cup and she has access all day? So it depends. Is this water interfering with her eating? Is it interfering with getting in breast milk? Looking at the big picture is really the way to evaluate that. There is no right or wrong answer. Does it seem like they are obsessively looking for water? Like they're just always really, really thirsty, more than you would expect them to be for your climate and what else they're having? If that's the case, it's worth talking to your doctor, because there are some medical conditions that can increase thirst and desire for water. Don't freak out, that is very rare. However, if it seems to you, trust your intuition. If it seems to you that the water seeking is way above and beyond where it would normally be, then talk to your doctor. Otherwise, you can cut back if you would like, but if it's not interfering with diet, if it's not interfering with what they're breastfeeding, it's an okay skill, it's an okay thing to want. Sometimes it's just that they can do that skill and that they enjoy that skill and it's the new skill that they've learned. It's really, without without seeing your kid and seeing what's happening, it's hard for me to say whether you should cut back or not. But look at the big picture. Look at, are they drinking and that's displacing their milk or their food? And that's just like when milk is displacing food. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at big picture here. There's nothing black and white with feeding, if you guys haven't already figured that out from my approach here. Okay, lots of questions about breastfeeding while pregnant. Like I was talking about, it was painful, but it went through. The other thing I will say is, and this is what I was worried about, there's a lot of information out there that says between 4 and 5 months, you tend to quote unquote dry up. And drying up can happen, in other words, milk going away. And it definitely seemed like my milk supply dipped between 4 and 5 months. And there were times that I thought that, my daughter would just say, no, I don't want it today. Or, she would suck for 1 second and then go off. And sometimes that can be because the flavor changes. And so that's definitely a possibility. The thing that I would say is just continuing to offer and continuing to work through it is the best thing that you can do for anything like that related to pregnancy. Like I said, I really thought that I wasn't ready. We were going to be weaning in the middle of pregnancy. I was okay with it when I got pregnant. But just continuing to offer, she went back. And then when the baby was born, she had a party and had as much milk as she wanted because there was more milk than I'd had forever. So it's a little bit of a different calculation when they're under 2 because you do want to make sure that they are nursing 3 to 4 times or getting a very good diet with fat and all of that. So if they're under 2, make sure that you're checking to make sure if you are not able to feed them that much or they seem to not want it because of the flavor, which will change back. But if at that point, then it's time to start considering supplementing potentially or making sure that they're getting lots of yogurt or other things with calcium and fat and all of that. So that would be my suggestion with that. So there's this one, and I just want to broach this in here because I talk about it in the blog post, but this just needs to be said. So how to balance cow milk. The pediatrician says it's important for fat intake while still nursing. Okay. Pediatricians don't know anything about nutrition. Sorry. I hate to say that. Unless they have taken a specific interest in nutrition, they don't know anything. And they're telling us all these inaccurate things, especially when it comes to breastfeeding. And that's part of the reason that I wrote this post is because the number of people that I have heard being told by their pediatrician that they need to stop or supplement or anything like that is insane. So if you are breastfeeding 3 to 4 times, you do not need to give cow's milk. If you look in my stories, you'll see that especially after they become toddlers, your breast milk actually increases in fat amount and there is no concern with amount of fat. So you do not need to add cow's milk or any other milk if you are breastfeeding 3 to 4 times in a 24-hour period. In fact, not only do you not need to add it, I recommend against adding it if you are nursing that often, because then you are going to be displacing food. And it's not better to combine the right amount of breast milk and additional cow's milk, because then you're going to be displacing even more food. So if you're nursing that much, do not give other milk unless there is a medical reason, in which case I would usually recommend cutting back on the breast milk so that the composition, the amount of milk that they're getting overall is not going to be displacing the food. So that's something that's lost in translation a lot with pediatricians, unfortunately. So there you go. That's what I would say. You can tell that that's a little bit of a hot button for me. It drives me nuts because there is no reason to make that recommendation. Okay, so lots of questions here about offering breast milk from a cup instead of a bottle at daycare. Yes. Especially by 18 months, we want them to be off of bottles, and that's specifically from a tooth standpoint, that's from an oral motor standpoint, all of that. So we definitely want to be getting them away from the bottle. We say at 12 months, it's not a hard and fast rule, start working on it. By 18 months, we do want them off of the bottle. Some babies do not like to switch to the cup. It's something that I talk about it in the weaning blog post that I keep talking about. It's something you have to commit to, and you just have to keep working with them on. Just like all other baby food items, things that you buy out there, you can buy 20 and it's like throwing things at the wall and seeing which one sticks, right? But it really is a skill that they're learning. So there's no magic cup that's going to happen. There's no nothing. It's just, if you try enough cups, it takes 2 weeks to get through all those cups. And in that time they've learned. And so the cup that you have at 2 weeks tends to be the one that they like. So I'm not a big fan of all sorts of different things, spending your money on them. Like, they're going to learn eventually. It is not an easy process to get them onto a cup from a bottle. It's something that you have to just commit to. Don't do sippy cups. You'll see that on my blog. Again, you can go search that. You're going to do straw cups or open cups. I know that with breast milk especially, it's like liquid gold. We don't want it spilling. So I'm totally fine with bottles or other types of non-open cups, but definitely avoid those hard spouted sippy cups. Okay, let's see. Sorry, bear with me as I find more questions here. They don't make this very easy to find this stuff. Okay. Questions about if you exclusively pump, if this info is still applicable to you. And I mentioned it in the blog post, so make sure you're reading the blog post. Pumping, if you're giving milk, you want to keep it a little bit more towards the 16 ounces, just like you would with any other type of milk that you're supplementing. Give it with meals, but you do have a little bit more of leeway in there because it's breast milk and not cow's milk. So because it's your milk, I definitely feel like it's okay to move it a little bit, to move the needle there from our recommendations. The other thing that I will say is I've gotten a lot of questions, which make me sad again, about whether you should give frozen breast milk and whether that is better than cow's milk. And the answer to that is absolutely better. If you have access to breast milk, you have pumped, you have frozen, you have anything like that, absolutely give that to your kid. And then when you run out or you want to stop pumping or anything like that, then that is when you can transition to the other milk. There is no reason not to give them frozen breast milk after they turn 1. Absolutely give it. It will always be better. It's what your body produced for them. So absolutely give that. The other question that I had was, should you keep pumping? And will that hurt your supply if you don't pump? So if you're at work 8 hours a day and you have a toddler and you nurse in the morning and then you nurse when you get home and you nurse at night, is that enough? Is that going to keep your supply up? All of that. And yes, it will be enough. It will keep your supply up. You will generally be fine. After the first couple of weeks, couple of months, your supply is pretty established. And so it's going to regulate based on your baby and what they need, your toddler and what they need, what you're doing, what your lifestyle is, because you don't need to pump at night if you are giving your baby enough, if your baby is continuing to meet their growth percentiles, if they're having enough wet diapers, all of that. So it is okay not to pump, especially if they are 1 and if you have to keep pumping, you're not going to breastfeed. Even 1 breastfeed is better than no breastfeeds. Can you guys hear my baby in the background? I only have a couple more minutes because I think she's losing it. Okay, so let's see if any of you guys... Okay, so the 14-month-old who won't drink milk at all but eats lots of yogurt and cheese, should you keep trying with milk? He nurses twice a day. So twice a day, because that's right, borderline, right? If they're not nursing at all, then again, you offer milk when you can't force, and focusing on those calcium-rich items and fat-rich items like the yogurt and cheese is key. So if you are nursing 2 times a day, this is a personal choice. You could introduce cow's milk or another milk that is appropriate. So when I say appropriate, usually that's going to be soy or pea milk. So you could introduce one of those. You don't need to. if they are having enough yogurt and cheese that they are meeting that kind of third amount there, and they are maintaining their growth and they have a pretty good diet overall, then nutritionally they should be fine with only 2 nursings, especially if they're longer than like 30 seconds. If your child really loves milk, there's no reason that you couldn't introduce a portion of milk into their day, but it's not a necessity. And that's kind of a gray area with the 2 nursings, but especially if they have a good diet and they're eating a lot of cheese and yogurt. And hopefully by a lot, we mean within the guidelines, right? So 24 ounces total of dairy food is what we want throughout the day so that we're not hindering iron absorption. So just keep that in mind. Don't go crazy with the yogurt and cheese. Okay, so the organic cow's milk better than regular cow's milk. Someone just put that question in here. I have a story highlight that talks to you about organic, so find that. I'm trying to see if for you guys that are here, I'm trying to see if I can answer any of your questions really quick before. Okay, so the boiling cow's milk before giving it to a 12-month-old, this is going to depend. So here in the United States, absolutely not. I've said no before, and people have said that it's the recommendation in your country. So if you're here in the States, absolutely don't need to do that. We don't want to give raw cow's milk to babies, though. It needs to be pasteurized. If it's not pasteurized, then you need to follow the recommendations. Like if milk is not pasteurized where you are, then you need to follow the recommendations for babies there. Okay. Scanning. Okay, so hopefully I answered your question about pumped milk. Absolutely still beneficial. Does breastfeeding cause white spots on babies' teeth? Not necessarily. That's a question for your dentist, but there is not much evidence. If you read the blog post, you'll see that there's not really much evidence for cavities in breast milk. If you're feeding at night, you can always wipe their teeth off with like a wet rag or something like that if there's no way to get them water or something else to rinse off their teeth. But again, that's kind of the prevailing myth that it's going to cause more cavities, and that's not necessarily a link that has been proven. So is the fat in breast milk enough for their brain development? 100% yes. Breast milk is tailored to what our babies need. This is kind of our modern medical thing of we know better, and so we're going to say that cow's milk is better for their brains. No, breast milk is tailored exactly to what they need. Breast milk is going to be 100% what they need on top of diet. So they don't need extra on top of that. Okay. So this one, 4 months, I lasted 14 months with my son, hopefully longer with this one. When I went back to work at 1 year, my supply dropped from just morning and bed feeds. Any tips to be more successful this time? So if they are 14 months, so that's what I was kind of talking about, it depends on the age. So if you need them to still be getting that 3 to 4 times, your supply is going to drop based on supply and demand. So if you're only doing morning and night, then it's going to make the milk that you need. So if you need them to have 3 to 4 times and you're not supplementing, then you are going to need to pump, because if you take it out, your body will make more. So if you're not taking it out, your body's going to downregulate to exactly what it needs, and what your baby is taking out. So if you're only nursing twice a day, and your baby is still young, the diet's not up there, and we do, especially right around 1, I want to see 3 to 4 times. When we get closer to actually 2, I'm totally fine with 2 times, and fudging the rest. But right at 1, they still need those easy calories from a milk. And so that would be, you're going to need to pump or put them at the boob more during the night, anything like that. That'll get your supply up and keep it. But it's a basic supply and demand issue of if your body is not having the milk removed, it's not going to make more. Okay. Let's see. I have a question about should be concerned about giving dairy product with iron-rich food. I have a highlight on that. Check that out in the highlights. Um, okay. Okay. Those are the questions. Let's see if you guys gave me any more. Okay. I think I'm gonna go and calm my crying baby. Hopefully that's helpful. I will save this and I will try and upload it to my YouTube channel so that it is reference for later and for other people to reference it. All right. Thanks, guys.